Your gas is free, your gas is free, in a debt-based economy. Your gas is free, your gas is free, in a debt-based economy. Your gas is free, your gas is free, in a debt-based economy. Your gas is free, your gas is free, in a debt-based economy. Here's the Webster Report with Paul the Gasman Webster.
Hello and welcome to the Webster Report on this Sunday, the 13th of October 2024. Things don't seem to be going any better, really, do they? You know, England won though. England won 3-1, so things can't be bad, can they? You know, things must be getting better. And yet, when we talk about football, nobody wants to talk about players just dropping dead, having cardiac arrests. We've got a United player now who's having an operation to do with cardiac. There's so many things going wrong from across the board. We're not just talking football. We're talking about everything. Everybody in life, 27, 30-year-olds, fitness fanatics just dropping dead, but baffled. People are baffled by it. And it makes you go, is there no common denominator? Well, there's a big elephant in the room, but nobody wants to talk about it. Every time I hear about somebody who I grew up with has passed away recently, and he's had an illness for a while, but the first question is how many? How many have he had? Because I don't know whether he had or he hadn't. But that's my first question, and I don't understand why people don't have those other questions. The world's very, very much changed. As we've said a few weeks ago, we've got the Pope saying that all religions go to heaven now. So it doesn't matter what religion you're in, everything goes to heaven, everything's cool, you can do what you want. Well, that doesn't seem to go with what is in the book that he's meant to preach from. So there's something changed there. We're seeing economic systems now getting stretched right to the hilt. We're seeing all the chaos and mayhem over the hurricanes over in the States. FEMA have run out of money because they spent their entire budget on the Ukraine. And so the governments have given people who have survived in these hurricane areas $750. Their entire homes have gone. We touched on last week that one of the towns has got a quartz mine and lithium mines in their surroundings. And these people, the mining corporations wanted to expand, but the people didn't want to. Well, there's no people there now. Is that a coincidence? Is it a coincidence what happened in Hawaii, where land is just free now because there's nobody there? Everything's been wiped out. But all the millionaires and billionaires' properties never got a sniff of smoke. We're speaking about all this every week, and yet people don't seem to join the dots. I've been out today, had a good chat with a good mate of mine who's so open-minded and understands it all. But everybody's got their own issues going on. Until that knock on their door comes, then it's always going to be the same. We're getting to the point, though, where, you know, maybe that's getting a little bit closer and closer as we move down this road. And, you know, what can you do? We'll just have to see how we go. I'll bring Alex in. Alex, you look like death warmed up, mate. How you doing? Oh, he's gone. Brilliant. I'll tell you what, you introduce him and he goes, I could start telling you anyway that Alex isn't feeling too well tonight. It was touch and go whether we were going to be able to do the show tonight because even though I can rattle on, I don't really like rattling on my own like this. I like to bounce off people and I like to get different types of views from people. That's what this show's meant to be all about. I'd like to say hello to some guys in the chat room. Michael again, how are you doing? Good old Noel is in there. And one of my muckers, Big Andy. Thanks for coming again, Mr. Matthews. You're always welcome. Hello.
Yeah, signal.
I introduce you and you sod off.
I don't know what I've had to
Oh dear.
swap. I've had to go on the hotspot.
Mate, I can't hear you.
Bad signal.
Try talking, mate, because I can't hear you.
But I'm back.
Not on my end, you know. Can anybody hear him okay in the chat room? Because I'm not getting much. Give me a thumbs up or something from the chat room. I don't know whether I can hear
Hello.
you. Mate, you're way behind. You're way behind. I can't tell what you're doing. Brilliant. Tell you what, technology, we're really moving on with this stuff, aren't we? Out of all the places in Britain, you find a place where there isn't a signal. I'm not even in the caravan, mate. It can't be my end, it's got to be you. You're not coming through, Alex. You're not coming through, mate. You'll have to... Je ne sais pas. You froze my end and I can't hear anything. Can anybody in the chat room tell me if they can hear Alex? Because he's gone again. Hey. Right, well, I'll start the subject anyway for tonight. There's been quite a few interesting topics that have come up through this week. In particular, the only reason I even use social media these days is because I've got a lot of good information that comes my way. Whereas I'm not even sure how many people see what I post, because I'll see a post that'll come up that may have been posted 2 days ago, and it might come up on my news feed, and there's 17 comments on that, but I've not been notified of any of them. So, like I said, I really don't know who sees or anything because of the shadow banning that's going on with that stuff. It's just getting ridiculous, really. But if I lost my train of thought then. Oh, it's a really good point as well. This is what happens when we have technical issues and I'm trying to do too many things at once here now. Right, anyway. So, off these news feeds, he's come back. Are you stopping?
I'm on my phone now. I had to come onto my phone. My computer's completely seized up on every... I tried to hotspot off this. I've tried to go on the Wi-Fi. Nothing's working. So I've come off my computer and I'm now on my phone, pal. Can you hear me okay?
You're perfect. You're perfect, mate. I'm trying to check my end if it's anything to do with me. I'm shutting stuff and checking it. And I thought, it can't be me. It can't be me.
No, I don't know, to be fair, but obviously it's working on my phone. It's not got the same functionality. I didn't even hear anything of what you said. It just had this circle going round. So apart from the first few seconds, I didn't hear what you said, pal.
Well, I couldn't hear anything you were saying back to me anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Anyway, Alex.
Yo, Paul.
You look like death warmed up. How are you doing?
I feel like death warmed up. Yeah, so I just got struck down with something earlier today. I was okay at first, and then I just felt really ropey. It's my guts basically, but I'll not bore people with the details. So
possibly
try and endure for a bit. I was going to read something off my phone actually. Funnily enough, a Facebook post came up from 4.5 years ago randomly this morning. I woke up this morning feeling really angry. Right? Didn't know why.
Funny you said that. So did I. I woke up angry this morning. That's weird.
Yeah. So I'm feeling all this stuff, and I went to meet my mate, right? And I didn't tell him about this, and he was feeling angry without saying it. He was expressing anger. I thought, what's going on here? So I got a notification of a Facebook post that I made in May of 2020, not long after COVID had kicked in. I can't remember if the lockdowns had kicked in. They might have done. But yeah, they declared this issue, didn't they, in March? But this was May 2020. And I just did this post. Somebody had hearted it, right, from 4.5 years ago this morning. So immediately I go, oh, what's that? I've not heard from this person. I didn't even know they were on my friends list. 4.5 years previously, they put this message on. And I'm reading it, and it's all about anger. And obviously it was anger under COVID. And I connected. I can't read it now because I'm on my phone. But I was going to read it. And it was like uncanny. And I thought, there seems to be a lot of anger floating around. Why has this come to me right now? It was like a real synchronicity, regardless of what you think about spirituality, God, and all this malarkey. It was a bit eerie. So, and it was talking about, I think, obviously early doors, what happened is people were already starting to feel, especially those of us who knew the truth and knew it was a scam, we were starting to feel already that this was a grab for our freedoms. And it massively impacted our life pretty quickly in a way that we knew was illegitimate, that it was a move that had been calculated for a long time. We didn't know exactly what they were going to do. We knew they were going to do something, and then we found out it was a pandemic. And then us lot, we kind of knew in the truth movement, also that's what they're doing. They're using the health card, like perfect. But randomly, I was just talking about the anger it was uncorking. And it was a bit ironic that this morning I was feeling all this anger, but I connected it to the processes of change within ourselves, and also like making sure that when you feel angry and frustrated about stuff, that you express it, because a lot of us suppress it. It goes down into the body. And a lot of the time, like I was noticing about my anger, it was because I was failing to speak up about things that needed to be spoken about. And if you think about the big proverbial foot coming down and squashing you, that makes most people feel angry. Like, look at what happened when the old suicide bombers used to sort of, first of all, strap things to themselves. That was because they felt powerless because some nation was lying about them as a pretext to invade the country and kill the people and bomb them and stuff. So you can understand why people get angry with a sense of enforced powerlessness. And so there you were under COVID, you're having a regime forced upon you, lockdowns, can't go to a pub, can't do anything, it's a scam, people's life prospects were taken away, students in schools, at college, at key points in the development, and all that taken away from them, any vision of the future. So of course people are going to get angry. And a lot of people didn't know how to speak out, they felt powerless. So it was just really resonant that this message from 4.5 years ago, when I woke up feeling angry, and I've been doing a lot of work on myself to uncork a lot of that stuff around me not expressing my voice how I should. And I've been feeling much more forthright recently. And I think there's something in it. I think we have all got to find a way of accessing the things that we're really most passionate about. Stop censoring ourselves. Because I tell you what, there was a guy called Michel Foucault, right? French guy. In the tradition of Derrida and the French continental postmodernist thinkers. And he said he wrote about something called the panopticon, or the all-seeing eye, that the state and other big entities try to install within us so that we police ourselves. And it was in a book that he wrote called Discipline and Punish. So what they want to do, ideally, they want to get us to police ourselves. So what you find is that when we stop policing ourselves, the policing comes from outside of yourself. So in this country, in the UK, we are the most surveilled country in the world in terms of per capita and the number of cameras and so on. So we're properly externally monitored. Never used to be that bad, but the panopticon is the all-seeing eye. So the government's ideal is to get that working inside of you so you police yourself. When that breaks down and enough people stop policing themselves to the satisfaction of the controlling state, the cameras that they install inside of you, when that breaks down, start to appear outside of you. And that's what's happened in the culture. This surveillance culture is evidence of that shift. So, all these dynamics are going on, have been affecting us, and particularly since COVID. And a lot of us have got a lot of things to say, and we've been muzzled. So, for me, I think that's quite topical, and maybe it's an energetic thing. And you said you woke up this morning feeling angry. I met my mate; he was uncorking some anger. Then I told him about the experience I'd had randomly. That somebody hearted a post from 4.5 years ago out of the blue when I happened to be feeling angry, and every one of the topics in that post was relevant to now. So I was a bit. I took it as a divine message. So I don't know why I'm sharing it, mate, but it just struck me as relevant, whether I feel a bit ill or not. Maybe we get ill sometimes because we suppress stuff. Maybe when we have things like this, it's a detox or a purge of our emotions. Do you know what I mean?
I think it always is, Alex. I think when you're ill, it's your body getting rid of stuff. You
Yeah,
don't. It's a detox. It's the same as people who put on pharmaceuticals. They have side effects. It's not a side effect. It's the body detoxing it. It's the body going, "Oh, we don't like that. That's not right."
yeah.
It's so. I think it's all encompassing, and also you've got the society pressures that are going on now. We've got bills going up. We've got food people going. I mean, food banks are banging round here, Alex. You know,
Yeah.
these good people, the ones who donate, the ones who work there, they're all working to help people who are. I've never, you couldn't imagine food banks 40 years ago. You know, we had co-ops 80 years ago, and this is 100 years ago, and that's what was meant to stop all this stuff. But when you start to, I go back to the lad who I was talking to today. He says, "Well, there's farmers that are saying they're being offered money to not grow things." I went, "Well, that's nothing new." And we go back to the EEC butter mountain. As an 8-year-old kid, I'm thinking, "Where's this pile of butter? Is it like in a big warehouse or something like that?" I couldn't. But then you realise that because we've got contracts with Europe and we're agreed to buy stuff off them, well, we don't want too much. So, hey, don't grow anything and we'll pay you not to. And it
Yeah,
just sets you up to not be self-sufficient. So we're already in the dilemma. And this was 40 years ago that was going on. So where are
yeah,
we at now? Where are we at now? We're moving along with an agenda that people don't monitor, that people don't look at, that people have just voted a Labour Party in for 4 more years who they don't even know what the manifesto is. And they're just going to get more of it and it's going to get shoved right up the rope. And they say, well, we'll get rid of Keir Starmer. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what face we're looking at anymore, Alex. Although it probably never has, to be fair.
yeah. Well, interestingly, Paul, when you were saying that then, right, what was going through my mind? Do you remember at football matches, people used to shout a lot of nasty things to the referee, like "Who's the bastard in the black?
Yeah.
Referee, you ain't good, you ain't good." Do you remember all that?
I can never
But
confirm nor deny if I partook in that.
there was another one, right, which is much more modest, but it's not just relevant to referees. It's like so many demographics in our society, whether it's the oligarchs or whatever, things you've just been talking about, whether it's Keir Starmer, but that line, "You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're doing." And it's basically talking to the ref and shouting at him and saying, "You're incompetent. You shouldn't be in charge of this match. You're making all the decisions wrong." And ultimately, I think on the inside, every one of us who knows stuff, who personally knows about the state of the world and is competent more or less a together person in their everyday life, is more or less shouting out, "You don't know what you're doing." But to all these other people who wore masks, who fell for this, incompetent, corrupt politicians, they don't know what they're doing. And you are going to be angry about that because you're spectating in a match with a people who are supposed to be professionals, right? Who are rubbish, who are garbage, who are messing it up. You paid your admission fee for a seat of life and you're being shortchanged. So, we are going to have an opinion about that. And as I've said many times in the past, the only answer, you can complain about the referee, you can complain about the football. Look at Manchester United now complaining no matter what they do. They're in disarray. As a Liverpool fan, you'll be quite pleased about that. But at the end of
Can
the day,
you
it falls
confirm or deny that?
good point, very diplomatic. We don't want to alienate our United fans. But that's the point, isn't it? Our voice needs to come out, because if you're watching insufferable incompetence, I have a friend, I was talking to him this morning. He's a nurse, a mental health nurse, very good at his job. He's ended up working in private. Well, he's in the NHS, but he has a lot of dealings with private hospitals. And a lot of the people, you might think the NHS is bad, but in a lot of these private hospitals in mental health, they're shocking. It's because they can't even be employed in the NHS. They're that bad. And they're getting away with all kinds of crap and being paid a king's ransom to do it. And he is a model of competence and integrity. And he's there. And because he stands up and he does what he should, he has integrity and he cares about the people, and he uses all his skills to get a result, he's fighting against the prevailing culture. His colleagues, in many ways, are the ones who drain him, not the clients. Now, that's a worrying state of affairs, because he doesn't have the seniority in his role to change the whole culture, but he's still got to work within it.
But has he seen, in his time, he will have seen a decline in therapists, as in the abilities of, just as I did in the prison service, I saw a steady decline to an almost drop-off of people who were coming into the prison service, and it was just clearly not a job that you could do. It's not for you. You'd be better suited doing something else. But
So,
what they've got in my job in particular was that if you failed at the job on the front line, you could always go sideways or you could get promoted. You know, we were talking about somebody today who couldn't do my job, couldn't hand out toilet rolls and do my job, but is now a governor. And they couldn't tell me what to do in my job. And if they tried, knowing that they couldn't do my job, I wouldn't appreciate it, and I certainly wouldn't look up to them. Whereas 15 years ago, well, it's longer than that now, but when I started in 2007, it was completely different. You saw people who not only done the job, but have got promoted the hard way. You know, because they wouldn't just toe the party line, they've had to prove themselves time and time again. They don't have to do that now. As long as you can laminate something and make it look pretty and be able to talk about it, it doesn't matter whether it'll work or not. On paper, that's all that matters. And my mate were talking today, he says in the offices where I used to work, they've got calendars up and it says no one cares. Because every time there's a problem, they go to somebody and they just go, eh. And that's why all the services are like that. They're all in the...
Yeah, so this is corruption and rot, and we're on the receiving end of it, and services are going downhill, right? So it's degeneracy, and it's a really big problem. And the bigger part of the problem for me is you can't do much about the degeneracy of the culture outside of yourself, but we can do something about the degeneracy inside ourselves. But what we tend to do, you find these opportunists in these hierarchies. They go, well, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. I've got a cover story here. Well, what do you expect me to do? The culture's corrupt. So you can have a GP who tries hard, say a decent one who tries the best, but they can always point at the culture and say, oh, look at the cultural failings. So, and everyone still needs to earn money and pay the mortgage if they're lucky enough to do, or pay the rent. So these practical challenges of life don't go away just because the corruption's there. You've still got to, live, make ends meet, but it's getting harder and harder. And if you've got any standards, and with my mate, he becomes the problem in the culture, but not because he is, but because he's making everybody else's life harder, because they're all colluding, agreeing to turn up and do no real work because they can get away with it. So this is where Jesus said in the Gospels, a little leaven leavens the whole lump. And we think in terms of things like sin, but you can just use a 3-letter word sin, or you can say behavior, conduct, attitude, integrity. Once that disease gets into the system, it very quickly colonizes all of it. Like when you get a bit of mold on one of your grapes, if you don't isolate that grape,
one bad apple.
Yeah, and suddenly they're all gone if you don't nip it in the bud. And this is where we're at really in our culture, this cultural degeneracy. We have to acknowledge that we can be a part of it simply by failing to act. We can get frustrated and angry, but this is my point. To free yourself, to become empowered, you've got to find your voice. But for that, you've got to stand for something. You've got to stand somewhere. You've got to take a stand. You've got to have an opinion. You've got to have a bit of passion, and you've got to get it out there. If you start making excuses, go, well, they've had a bad day, can't say that to them, can't upset them, Got to watch my P's and Q's. Sometimes you just got to lay it on the line and tell people, look, you're incompetent piece of work and you need to do better. You need to improve. You need to raise the bar higher. And if we don't do that, we're going to be sat in our frustration, for me, which is like sat in your own excrement.
Well, in my experience, if you was useless but you did as you were told, you could get promoted. That's how you get into senior management, apparently. But when the shit hits the fan, these people haven't got a clue. I've been there, I've seen it. You know, these are people with real lives, and you've got jails now that are just not in control. You know, I was discussing a thing today with somebody who's still in the job, and you know, this young lad, he's 18-year-old. It's belting down with rain, and he's pulling a trolley. No, you don't pull trolleys. You're an officer. Prisoners pull trolleys. They're the orderlies. But one prisoner runs off to speak to somebody through a window to one of his mates. One runs to healthcare, and my mate, who's been in the job 20 odd years, is going, "Officer, get your prisoners under control." Not interested, because he didn't know what to do. He's 18-year-old. You've got two prisoners that are older than him doing what they want. So that's what that's what the government, through all their policies, have changed. You know, people can call it diversity or whatever it is, but you get rid of really good staff who've been there a long time, and then you replace them with staff who can't do the job, not fit for the job. You know, it's strange, and a lot of the times is to tick boxes. You know, we had one lad years ago. They were trying to tick boxes for disabilities and that. And we had a lad in who had Asperger's. Now, I worked with a lad who had autism. He was well on the scale, and he was brilliant at his job. If you took a tube of toothpaste out of his storeroom, he'd ask you, "Have you took toothpaste? Who's took toothpaste?" He knew what was in there, where it was, what it all looked like. He could even probably count it. So it wasn't about having Asperger's, but there's different kinds, isn't there, Alex? So when you get to a level where a prisoner could articulate a good enough reason to hand a set of keys, say the officer's got his hands full, and the prisoner says, "Well, because you've got your hands full, boss, just give me your key and I'll just unlock it." Now, to this lad, that made sense. But he's giving his security away to the entire jail just by trusting that. You can't do that in that job. So for ticking boxes, he was willing to put people in jeopardy. One staff member, 3 days running, didn't lock all the landing up and then gone home. You've signed for them numbers, Alex. So this was reducing the job that I loved, that I loved doing, and I could do well, and I could see it didn't matter anymore. You know, it really didn't matter. And when such a security job like that is being reduced, you've got to then look at the NHS, and you see the NHS is being drained as well. The police, you know, I've got good mates who are in the police, and they're going to see these massive changes. They're seeing it now. So it's going to keep happening. The ambulance service is it's not even on its knees, it's on its chin.
Yeah.
But with no money for it. It's silliness. It's silliness because everybody wants to blame everybody else, but nobody wants to look at themselves and say, "Have you acted wrongly?" Well, we have acted wrongly. We've been taught to act wrongly. So that means we've put ourselves in this position, and there's no point crying and stamping your feet about it and saying, "I protest." Things have got to change. But you've got to get to that fulcrum, haven't you? You've got to get to that pit.
Well, interestingly, what you say, right? What we get health and safety and well-being manipulated and used against us because everyone's fearful. So, for example, that's why it always used to be about the nurses getting pay rises. Why? Was it because people particularly cared about nurses? No, because they were all crap in it. If they went into hospital and there was no nurses, they'd have a problem. Or people exploit things around children because children are a sensitive spot, or older people. Anything that can be programmed and used as a weapon will be weaponized. Health and safety, risk assessments. So I'll give you one example. I used to work at a creativity project with a drama therapy colleague, And when you start working in mental health, sometimes if you want to get a result, something that you might consider to be real healing, you've got to deal with a person who's often been deeply traumatized over many years, deeply misunderstood, is like buried under layers of volcanic ash. So the deeper, authentic person beneath all of that volcanic ash needs to be given some space to breathe. So the first thing you have to do is remove the pile of volcanic ash. You have to dig them out, like with any disaster, so that they can breathe. Now, with process of psychosis, this one woman once in this creativity project, and she was always like a sardine in a tin because she was being medicalized, she was in a clinical program, she was being managed in the community. She was a lovely person, very innocent, perhaps technically a little bit vulnerable. But she started reciting her poetry and then singing it in this group. But then what happened found out that as she was coming alive and started to express herself creatively, she started singing on public transport and coming up to people, not in an intimidating way. She was probably about 2 stone wet through. Asian girl, can't obviously reveal her name, but many moons ago, she just started singing to punters on the bus. When the care coordinator found out, he didn't have the ability to step back, just issue the right cautionary advice to her about, maybe you need to be aware of singing to strangers. You could get yourself in a compromised situation. If that had been done properly, it could have been that the creativity project could have continued, and we could have dug her out of that ash, and that creative expression could have enabled her to find her voice. We're talking about anger before, when you suppress your voice. Well, just because she was so-called diagnosed psychotic, she's not allowed to have a voice. What happened they shut her down, stopped her coming to the creativity group as part of a risk assessment that they did, because there was a risk of psychosis. So it was just being considered that by exposing her to her own creativity, which was making her come alive, they tried to claim she's vulnerable and it was a danger to her. But if they'd have managed that properly and they'd had the competence, right, it would have been managed. So, but it was all about, obviously, embarrassment or issues to do affecting the public. And ultimately, they shut it down. They shut her process down because it made their life easier. And it's like a lot of teachers at school, even with young kids, they give them gold stars for behaving. And what does that mean? Don't disrupt the teacher. So we teach the kid, you can have a gold star if you conform, if you don't upset the teacher and create any problems, and then we're one step away from it. And if you don't ask any difficult questions, and if you make life easy for the teacher who's just going to come to work, and they're going to make the money, and then they're going to go home, and they're going to tell everyone that their profession or career is a teacher. Meanwhile, what have they really done for those kids? Then many years later, if they're lucky enough to go to a youth club, maybe they can find a compassionate youth worker who can actually work with the real human being beneath it all. That's the problem. And I'll just round off this bit by saying in the Old Testament, talking about God, there's that immortal line about King David and why he was chosen over against this young lad, because he had the heart of a lion. And the line was, man looketh upon the outward appearance. When people looked at him and said, who's this lad? Little shepherd boy. What's he going to do against this big Philistine Goliath? But he said, but God looks upon the heart. It doesn't just have to be God. We can see deeper if we want to. But for these people in these types of situations, they want convenience. All right, this lass here, yeah, it's creating a problem, this. How are we going to shut it down to make sure problems don't happen? Let's do a risk assessment and shut the process down. Let's bury her back under that volcanic ash, and that way she won't make any noise. Yeah, okay, we've sacrificed her life, but don't worry about it. I'm going home and tea will be on my table and I've got my career prospects for progression. Oh, well, not to worry. It's in her best interest. So you get all these paternalistic types making massive decisions on behalf of other people's lives who could have received healing help. And the workers at the front line who want to change something get told, sorry, we had to take her out of the project. She's vulnerable and it could have created a problem for her. Yeah, but it almost certainly wouldn't have done if you'd have managed it competently. And when you've got that across the board, you can't have compassion and empathy. You can't reach the real human being under all that debris. And that's what we've got to do. And I think this is why we come back to Christianity, because it offers that spiritual dimension that validates the human being underneath the appearance.
Well, going back to the schools are now allowing children to just get away with far too much. It's not just being able to identify as a wolf, but Children are becoming violent. I'm hearing primary school teachers say that it's now being told to them, it's part of their job, that they may get assaulted, right? Even in my job, we never accepted that. I don't go to work to get assaulted. So that's not going to happen. But the factor is, you're dealing with children. Are you, 10-year-old kids can, they can get a bit angry, they can throw a few punches, but you're meant to just not be able to do anything. You can't restrain, you can't do this. You're giving the kids what they want to be able to do. So they're saying that society's like this now because, the schoolings have changed. The children that are going into these schools have changed. The amount of kids that need special needs attention, they can't fit in. They don't know what schooling is like, and possibly even like people like myself who went to school, the authority of school and that stigma. I couldn't wait to get out of school. It didn't feel a place I wanted to be. All I see now is what schooling was to me is no different to what prison is. Tells you what this time's happening, this is happening, that's happening. You can do this, you can't do that. You need to put your hand up for this, and you need to ask permission. So it was all preparation. And you're talking about teachers who haven't got that level to be able to bring a child down. I know really great teachers who are called upon from a different part of the school to deal with a specific lad who's off the rails. And there's only this teacher that can do this. And she brings him down like that. Now, that's a skill, but that's not recognised. Because as long as you've got a certificate, that means you're better than that teacher or you're as equal as that teacher. But there's different skills to this. But now that's being taken away from the teachers. They're basically babysitters. I spoke with you off air because an article came up that's now being investigated in America where a child had come home with a sticker from primary school.
Right.
I think they were 5-year-old, this little kid. And the mum says, "Oh, that's a strange sticker. Where have you got that from?" She says, "Oh, it's my sleepy sticker. They give them us at school." She says, "What do you mean, a sleepy sticker?" She says, "Well, they give me this sticker, they put it on my arm there, and then within so many times, I start to feel sleepy, and I go to sleep." And this mum went, "This can't be true." So she went on to social media and she asked the other parents in these groups, "Look, have you ever heard of these sleepy stickers?" And then they've asked their kids, and they said, "Yeah, they give us sleepy stickers at school, and it makes them sleep." So they're going to school, and they're drugging them to let them sleep, so they're not as rough and ready, and they're not boisterous. What are they doing to the children? You've got drag queens teaching them stories. It's not about kids being around drag queens. It's why drag queens want to be around kids. And now we're drugging kids. We're changing society again, Alex, but this is very severe. This is now under investigation. Where does this go? What happens? Is it just one school that's doing it? Is it a naughty school? Or are we seeing something being implemented like Kat when she came on, when they went and challenged in the courts about a curriculum that's teaching primary kids about anal sex and masturbation? Society's falling, mate. Straight off the cliff here. If I found out my kid was being drugged by the school, where do you want to start with that one, mate?
Well, nothing would surprise me at all. At all. Now, I just look at it, so it's difficult. I'm just trying to comment, so the functionality on this mobile is interesting. There's somebody on the chat called I Beheld or something, talked about this anger and been sleeping with an earthing blanket and been feeling miles better. And it's interesting because so I think we've got to solve problems at the appropriate cultural level and social level if we can, as well as on the individual level. So there might be methods and techniques that we can use to soothe ourselves and, I don't know, maybe be on top of these things. But we also have to find our expression. And I think we also need to address the cultural problems because, like you were saying, Paul, it isn't the competence of many good teachers or like the best youth workers I encountered. There's slight risks at the edges that you have to take. You can't be straight down the line. When I think of some of the best work I did when I worked in mental health, it was edgy. I had to make a judgment about whether I felt this person could. I don't like the word rehabilitation, it sounds patronizing, but that was my job. I had to make a decision as to whether I really felt that this person had enough going on, enough commitment, enough determination. And then one time a senior manager quizzing me and saying, well, you seem to select the people that you work with. I said, well, do tell. You don't. Everyone who's got respect for the job and the role is going to try and maximize the success, and they're going to work with people who are responsive. You're not going to work, to pardon the pun. Well, it's not a pun really, but flogging the dead horse. At the end of the day, who wants to do that? It's a waste of energy. And that's one of the things I've realized in my life. Like, I spent a lot of time giving a lot of energy to a lot of causes that were all valid, but most of them were non-starters. And that's not a lack of empathy or compassion. At some point, you've got to be realistic. We've got to fight the battles that we have a prospect of winning. But at the same time, you've got to make sure that you don't sacrifice yourself, because there's so much energy demand upon us all now in a degenerate culture. There's only so much to go around. This is why this emphasis, like I said last week, regardless of what you think of Farage and co, at least their emphasis is the individual, the family, the community, and the nation. And we have all got to, I think, make sure to explore who the significant people are in our lives and build community. Like even this, every week when we do this, and people come on, and it's good to see you all as usual, we're building some sort of community. And again, when we've opened it up before, and it's going to be a shorter one tonight, we're endeavoring to give people their voice. We don't all agree with each other. We don't all have the same emphasis. We've all got our hobby horse and pet topics, but it's important that everyone's voice, has a chance to be heard. And this is one of the things in politics. We're disenfranchised. You're voting for somebody who isn't going to represent you. Technically, there's an MP surgery. Technically, every blue moon, some politician. Do you remember who was it who came in? Was it Jeremy Corbyn as one of these gimmicks? And he tried reading out all these emails that he got from the public in Prime Minister's Question Time. And it was like this really not, oh, look at Jeremy, he's man of the people, he's reading out people's emails. It was a lame gesture, but at least on some levels, he was symbolizing the fact that there's a vast gulf between these professional career politicians who make decisions clearly in their own interests and your everyday person who doesn't get their voice heard. And it's this powerlessness and loss of voice which is making a lot of people ill, because in order to function, you need to feel empowered. So, for example, do you know when you go to airport and you can sometimes go on those escalators that are like, they're not vertical, they're horizontal, and you can go a bit faster with your luggage on them. Well, have you ever tried walking against one? You can, but you've got that resistance. And if you don't move, you start going backwards. And in life with humans, if you get to a point in your own life where you lose your curiosity, you lose your motivation, you don't have a reason to get up in the morning, that typically and clinically gets labeled depression, you've lost the vital source of your own life. You have no reason to carry on. Many people kill themselves, they feel hopeless. So we've got to find a way, like I say, of digging people out of all this volcanic ash that they've been buried under and helping them to rediscover the purpose and meaning in life, which is very difficult in this world. But I think that's got to be our goal in everything that we do. And on the podcast, with everyone who comes on, we've got to keep front and centre the fact that we're all here to experience and share our empowerment, because it's only in that way that we'll build the strength to overcome. There isn't going to be any simple blueprint or plan that you found in a textbook, page 457, implement these 10 rules and all will get better. We've got past the level of fantasy and fairy tale. We've got to work a little bit more smart, I think, and get our priorities right, which is galvanizing ourselves and each other in our communities. And this is a community.
You're right. It's the information that comes out, not just from you and myself, but other people who not only in the chat room, but the likes who come on. All these experiences, they need to be shared with other people. It doesn't matter what they think of you. You've just got to share it. At least you've told them. 10 years ago, geoengineering, I was a nutter. But now Dubai's underwater, everywhere's underwater. We're all talking about, can storms be whipped up now, which is what we were talking about over 10
Yeah,
years ago, Alex.
yeah,
Well, there's nothing new. The Sahara Desert's got greenery and it's flooded. There's something that's changed, and it's not down to climate change, because climate change has always happened. But this stuff it's particular. Dubai can't handle the amount of rain that they've created, and
yeah,
it's not a secret. It's open. Yeah, we created this, but our sewer system, because we're not used to it, is overloaded. We can't do anything with it. Maybe you can't just, make sure. Well, we only sprinkle a little bit of that in it because we don't want to flood it too much. So maybe they can't get the ratios right. But seeing as the RAF flooded a town in Britain 50, 60, 70 years ago,
yeah.
and now they know that that's what it did. That killed people, Alex. It destroyed properties. Who pays for this? Nobody's ever held accountable. You've got a government that's been voted in, so legally they can do what's in their manifesto and they don't have to listen to you, but they give you a chance to protest. Well, that's
Yeah.
like, as you said before, that's like a child saying, I'm not going to bed. The child ends up in bed. So you've got the right to protest. I know you don't want to go to bed. Night, night, and that's it. So people have got to, if there's anything left in people anyway, because I don't know if it's battle scarred or battered or Stockholm syndrome or a mixture of all of it, but they're after people's kids. They're after your kids. What are you going to do? It's
Yeah. What are we going to do, Paul? I know it's the Wigan Joker's on, and he says two things I can see. Have we mentioned that the gas is free yet, and have I missed it? So there you go. And also, have we seen the new transgender stormtrooper? Which makes me think. I know you mentioned some stuff about the Pope declaring all religions equally valid ways to God, but have you seen the one about that full-on transgender priest in the Anglican Communion?
No, I'm not.
Yeah, yeah. So they've even embraced trans in the church as well. So it's a good example of how these political ideologies are infecting everything. In a situation where that's clearly not a part of those traditions, Christian traditions. It just isn't. And you've really got to stretch things to try and make the claim. But I saw some of his stuff on YouTube, and look, he seemed like an okay guy, but he just looked like full of anxiety. Like you could see the problems that he had in his life that he hadn't addressed, had led him to go down the trans path, question his identity because he was in like a form of personal instability, and decided that he was going to resolve it in that way. And you see it with a lot of kids. They're told there's a crisis in advance when there isn't one, which is the thing that confuses them. So actually, it's not even now that we need to respond to crisis in a young person. Say we are manufacturing in our culture the crisis in the young people. So it's even worse. And then we're coming out with these fake solutions by promoting it and then saying we need transgender priests. I mean, it's incredible. If you look at it, the whole world's being colonized with insanity. Do you see Kamala Harris as well? She was boasting about on some video how she had personally seen to it that members of the military who wanted to transition, that she'd stopped all discrimination against them and that the paycheck was open to pay for any of them. And she described that as a need that they had. They have a need. If they're a transgender, they've got needs, and we discriminate against them. If we don't pay this money to facilitate their needs, we're all oppressors. And I thought, wow, she's saying that openly. It's still available on YouTube and on X. You can find it. I think Elon Musk commented on this, saying, look, this is still on the internet and no one's taking it down. Nobody's thinking that this has shot Kamala Harris's credibility. She can say it without even a hint of irony. And you can see a lot of people who are going, oh, yeah, brilliant, fantastic. Yeah, chuck a load more money at trans. Virtually nobody I know is trans. Well, there wasn't. And then I went into my local Wetherspoons, and there was a phase about 6 months ago where all of a sudden there were about 3 or 4 gay members of staff and 2 trans members of staff. And I'm thinking, and you can see it's all policy level stuff. Oh, they're being discriminated against. So we've got to basically get a truckload of trans and gay people in to become our staff, like they've done on the BBC with all the people of colour who are not white, or all these sort of homosexual families, to try and normalise these things. And it's quite bizarre, really. It is bizarre to me.
All of it, everything that's going on is bizarre. From children in schools defining themselves as a wolf. I identify as a wolf, and the school are treating them as a wolf. It's beyond any logic that I could ever take a grasp of. Jimmy mentioned earlier about the new stormtrooper. It's a transgender stormtrooper called Sister. They've ruined Star Wars for me. Disney has absolutely destroyed Star Wars for me. There was only one woman in that galaxy, mate.
Yeah.
Most of the time, there's only one woman. I can't.
Well,
Honestly, I can't grasp it, mate. I don't understand. I mean, the people who are producing this stuff for Disney and Star Wars, the main producer says, "I'm going to make it as gay as I can." Why?
Well, the Joker says.
Gay? Why has it got to be gay?
Well, the Wigan Joker says apparently Disney's biggest shareholder is BlackRock.
Yeah. Well, this is so all these agendas are being pushed. All this, all the stuff with the jibby jabs, everything is an agenda that's being pushed. It's all being pushed by the same economic forum. But who are the members of these economic forums? We've got members there, so it's everywhere. Now,
I'll tell you, he's not on that forum, mate. Alex Salmond.
Well, he's not on anything anymore, is he?
No. Suddenly he's popped off. I wonder what that's about.
Do you think? Do you think, or is it just old age?
I did some research, mate. I couldn't. Sometimes, if you do your research via Google, you'll find a link and X. Like when Kevin Campbell, the former Arsenal striker, died a few months back. It was easy to find his X post after he'd had his first vaccine and he was happy and it was protecting everyone. There's a few of those. Usually I can find something that comes back to a tweet on X, proves that they had it. I couldn't tell with Alex Salmond, but I'm presuming that basically he did. I would have thought he did.
Well,
and he's not here.
I weren't really in touch with what Salmond was doing because, he had other party members, like Jimmy Cranky, who was making money, selling all stuff off and giving jobs for the boys. And then you realise that Scotland are being screwed more than anything. They were ahead of us on a lot of things. I mean, don't forget, they were all baffled in Scotland when a convicted rapist, became trans and was put in a female prison, and he raped women. I thought, why are you baffled? What's baffling about that? You take a rapist who says he's a woman, you put him with women, and you're shocked that he raped women. I mean, you probably can't even use that term anymore. It's got to be rape or something like that. You can't openly and honestly speak about common sense things anymore, Alex. And no. I've never, in 52 years, I've never seen a society that I've participated in that is anything like this over the last, you could say 10, 15, you could say 20 years, but the last 5 years, it's tipped to scale. And it's shown people have shown the true colours. We were talking, my mate who was in Tesco, he was going around Tesco, and it was when they were doing all the one-way systems, and you had to wait for a green light before you could go in and all that stuff. And he's walking around and he sees what he wants, but there's no entry sign. He's got to go down the aisle and come back up to get it. But he can just reach over, which he does. He reaches over it and gets it because it's within grabbing distance. And this woman comes running up to him with a mask on and says, no, and she wanted him to put it back. and go round. It's in his hand. It's in his hand, and he said I looked at her, and he said I couldn't. He said I didn't know what to say. I said, how many swear words did you throw at her? He says, I managed not swear at her. He says, but I just looked at her, and he says, love, it's in my hand and it's in my trolley now. See ya. And just walked off. But
Yeah.
what happened with people over that, Alex? How did people just go puff and obliterate themselves into stupidity? Because what it did was it also made people feel like Billy Tenman. We had security guards in Asda wrapping people up because they won't put a mask on. Police being called. What a waste! What a waste of bloody resources. You've got knife gangs, you've got grooming gangs, all that going on. They can't investigate it because some fella's not put a mask on or somebody's refused a smart meter. Something's got to change here, mate. Someone's got to break
Well,
this.
do you remember that professor in the University of Ghent in Belgium, Matthias Desma? He talked about mass formation and how it can lead groups of people. It was, into almost like psychotic states. Now, it's similar to the seminal work of Gustave Le Bon, which Ed will come out with his line. He might come on actually do an impression for something that he did, a friend of mine, in 1895. Gustave Le Bon was talking about the sorts of mesmerism that people subsequently, like Hitler, seem to be able to exercise over the masses. Now, you can say that that's a quality in Hitler, that he was charismatic. It's not just a quality in him, it's a susceptibility in people. Now, is that just because people are gullible and they believe in authority? Well, you could say it's that, but I don't think we're giving humans enough credit. With things like mass formation, it's clear that the time is ripe for people who want to come together against, say they've got a frustration in their own life, an itch that they've never been able to scratch. And if an opportunity comes along, everyone can have like this vicarious projection of all the bitterness and anger. This is why this anger theme at the beginning is quite relevant, because a lot of us are holding on to angers and frustrations. And that's not just truthers, people in life generally, whose life prospects have been compromised by anything, or just misfortune in general without any elite, doing it to them. So there's a lot of people carrying a lot of frustrations and frustrations about modern life, even before these oppressions got ramped up. And they've got to do something with that energy. So to become a part of a group think that can persecute a scapegoat called the anti-vaxxers, called the mask refuseniks, or whatever the mainstream media want to label us with, that all fits into this propagandizing. So it isn't just the charismatic leader who has a quality that hypnotizes people. There's a susceptibility in people. And is that because they're stupid? We like to call them sheep and stupid, but they're human and they've got susceptibilities, and largely it's unmet need. If people are walking around feeling invisible, that nobody cares about them, nobody sees them, then they'll live and act with no confidence, with insecurity, and so on and so forth. It's inevitable. This is one of the things about human beings. We know enough about them now from psychology. It's like with a computer, garbage in, garbage out. Nurturing, maybe some decent qualities come out. If you shit on people, if you treat them like garbage, if you make them feel invisible, suddenly they'll shrink back. And when they shrink back, secretly frustrated, can't find a voice, don't have an outlet, don't know what to do, feel disempowered, they'll start getting into more antisocial activities, and perfectly in a spectator sport where you can go, oh, look, all the baddies are out. Oh, all these 9/11 conspiracy theorists, all these, and suddenly conspiracy theory, and that's been mobilized. That's why people did it to death, or a conspiracy theorist, with not a grain of intelligence, just a simple throwaway phrase to silence people. So I think we've got to look very deep at the causes, and not just the causes, because some of the causes we can't do much about, but the solution is always down to us. Something else might have caused it, but we can provide something that at least mitigates it. And again, it comes down to us. If I have something to say here, right, and I don't say it, you can say, well, what difference does it make? My life might be easier. But all the people who might have benefited from hearing it won't hear it. So every time each one of us makes a decision to shrink back out of fear, insecurity, self-doubt, you know, then potentially everyone loses out. Imagine, you know, 5 million people in this country who are aware of the truth started speaking out, started stepping up, started writing letters to the council, started putting the money where the mouth is, started to have confidence in who they were and what they were about, started to not talk about being sovereign, but actually being sovereign. And that's the downside, that when we turn things into a talking shop, talking's important, communicating's important, but often there's no end product and we chase our tail. So we got to find a way to build an army in the non-military sense of, you know, empowered individuals who have answers and can offer something to this world. Because most people we deal with, wall-to-wall incompetence in the institutions, the people have given up. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. That's a bleak picture, but we can do something about it by not being like that. That's the first point. I know I keep coming back to it like a broken record, but I can't get away from it.
Well, when you were talking about Hitler and the how he could enthrall people and drag them in, bearing in mind when Hitler took over in 1933, Alex, they'd had 15 years of living in abstract poverty. They had absolutely nothing. And this man came in, not only did he make all these bold promises and make all these rafts of changes, everybody's back in employment, and people who were living in a gutter with nothing have suddenly got a 3-bed semi-detached with a family car, and they're going on package holidays, and they're the second biggest superpower in the world. If people are growing up and then you've got the education system, no wonder there's Hitler Youth admiring this man. Their parents have taught them, look, we had nothing. They were stealing everything from us, and this man come in and changed everything. How could he have not been a hero to some people from abstract, absolute poverty? You know, people don't bother going into the psychopathy of this. It was primed for somebody like Hitler. You know, they needed somebody. Well, they always provide us with the people that we need, don't we? So who's going to be provided to us? It's obviously not Keir Starmer.
No.
Who's it going to be? Is it going to be Nigel Farage? As you say, whether you like him or not, he says things that people should be talking about. It's the same as people who've been on my show in the past. They are talking about things like satanic ritual abuse, child abuse, yet you're being told that these are shills. They still work for this and that and the other. Well, when I've been told that I'm ex-MI5, MI6 and GCHQ, and I know that that's not true, it's strange because these people are talking about real things. So it doesn't matter what they are, because if they are wrong uns, then it'll come out. But you give them the chance because they're talking about a subject that nobody wants to talk about.
Yeah.
This is where we get stuck.
Well, you know, one of our best barometers, look at what they do to kids. But kids are the best judge of character. They can see through fake just like that, because they're still in touch with the authentic potentials and innocence that they always were. And it just gets misdirected. And so I'm just looking at another couple more comments on the chat. So even Wigan Joker again, I'm struggling with anger at the minute. You know, these are the types of things that we need to acknowledge to ourselves. So thanks for saying that on the chat there. But that's why I was saying at the beginning, my mate this morning, he was saying the same. And then Noel's come with a comment saying, my cousin is a spiritual healer. I had a session with her and was able to purge suppressed emotions that I didn't even know I had. She says, I need another 2 sessions. This is the point about the unconscious, or things that might have been driving you all your life, and you just got a vague sense of unease. You don't know what it is, but something feels misaligned.
No, something's wrong. Everybody knows there's something wrong, Alex.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's an opportunity, Paul. Like, for example, if you're authentic, right, it's a bit like a seed that all the humanist school in therapy from Carl Rogers said, you don't need to make a seed grow. It'll grow if you plant it in the right soil with the right fertilizer, you provide it with the right light quality, warmth, fertilizer and water, it will grow by itself. So what we need to do is create the correct conditions conducive to life and authenticity, and that will naturally start to manifest itself. Remove the obstacles that hinder our healthiness, and I think that those are the types of things that we all need to do, that audit, because life is pressing on us. And if you're authentic and real and honest about your own struggles, you might realize things that you didn't even understand that you're holding on to. And it's that level of healing and wholeness that people need now, because when you've got that, if other people see you, they can see the difference between a person who's got something, some life in them that's working, they're thriving. Jesus talks about abundant life in John 10. I've come that they might have life and have it more abundantly. So that's the blueprint. So when we fall short of that, people might just be in misery, sat on their hands going, oh, it's crap this, it's crap this. But if they see somebody like Robinson Crusoe on his island and he sees that one ship, there's hope that passing by I could get rescued. So when people get their act together, start to live up to their potential, even in these difficult times, it gives inspiration to everybody else. And that's what we need in a demoralized culture. We need to inspire one another. The other week, when Joker was on, it's a few weeks ago now, talked about his own creative projects. This is one of the ways for us to get out of the abyss. Develop your interests, your creative process, and don't get sidetracked too much with the crap that they're doing to us. Yeah, come and talk about it here. But when you come off tonight, don't just watch wall-to-wall YouTube videos on how crap the world is for the rest of the week. Resolve, when you've got the truth, I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to work on myself. People work on themselves by going to the gym to get physically fit. So why not get spiritually fit, psychologically fit, emotionally fit, deal with your demons? Now is the time to do it, mate.
I think there's a lot of people that I think that's one of the reasons why people are feeling these heightened emotions. Somebody in the chat said earlier that they didn't feel anger; they just felt a strange energy.
Right.
When I went out the back, I went out to put something in the bin, and I opened the back door and I stepped outside, and it was eerily silent apart from bird song. And this is like dinner time, mid-afternoon, and my area, it's never quiet like that. There's somebody drilling or sanding or banging something, and it was silent, no cars, nothing. It was a very strange feeling. But when I got up this morning, I was angry about something. I couldn't think what.
Yeah.
You always look into yourself and you go, "What have I done? Did I do something? Have I said something I shouldn't?" And I thought, I can't feel where this isn't mine. This isn't mine. This, So it was binding and getting rid. It was things like that. Today I wasn't even going to meet my mate because it had put me in that much of a mood. I felt like I just wanted to shut the curtains and stop in again. And I thought, no, that's allowing this to beat me again. There's been a lot that's come through in the past week with me, and it's not only joining the dots, but it's showing me that there's a way forward. But without that healing, you can't take that step forward. And there's deep-rooted. Jimmy was saying that he's got deep-rooted anger and fear.
I was just going to point that out. Yeah.
Anger and fear go hand in hand. They're never separate. It's continued demon that plays on those emotions. So I concur with that, mate. It's about healing at the end of the day. I can't help anybody. I can give this information out and tell them my story and things like that. But if I'm not healed, then I can't just help people. The scriptures say I can't take the beam out of your eye when I've got a splinter in my own. Well, I've had a forest in my face and I'm just clearing it out now. And this world, as you well know, over the last 4 years has jumped up and down over me all again.
Yeah.
Coming after me, attacking me, everything with the job. It's been the last 4 years, I could say, was worse than the previous 10 with armed police and everything, because I thought it was clear of everything. And it's when you think you're clear, and especially I've said this to you before, there's times where when something good happens, you go, oh, well, that's good. When's it going to go wrong? When's this going to happen? When's that going to happen? And it's hard to get out of that cycle, you know. It's like a washing machine. You keep putting your shit in this washing machine, but it still comes out covered in crap. It
Yeah,
doesn't.
yeah,
So it's bit by bit, and it's getting out, going to do me walks again. You know, my
yeah,
mate said to me, he said, I've not seen you on misguided bus route for ages. And I said, no, I've not been going out because of everything that's gone on. And I can't keep allowing that to beat me, because then I'm not going to be able to step forward. And without stepping forward, we can't see what's going to be over the next hill, over the next horizon. Maybe a lot of people are like on the verge of coming to the crest of a hill, and they give up, and the finish line's just on the other side of the hill. And
yeah,
you know, anybody from a different perspective on the side can see they've stopped here, and just here is the finish line, but they can't see it.
yeah,
But anybody who's not involved in that can see it. You know, I spent time with a mate who's been going through a lot, and he's suffering with alcohol at the minute, and he had these massive DTs, and you see it that this is real, that's affecting people really deeply, and it's all about healing. But all this stuff is coming out, and it's affecting people to the point where, do they give up, or can they push through? Because I think the biggest thing for me, Alex, if you get up when you want to give up, if you don't and you carry on, that's the biggest thing anybody can do. It's when you give up. It's if you don't stop giving up, then you're never going to get beat. But bloody hell, this life's tough. You know, there's people at it worse than me, a lot worse than me, and they're still grafting through. But there's people who've had it not worse than me, and they've give up. They've taken their own lives. This is what the world is, but this is now being normalised. They're talking about an assisted suicide bill now.
yeah, yeah,
What this is pushing people into a path where you can do what you want. I can identify as a wolf. Yeah, I've had 50 good years. I've had enough of this world. You know, I don't want to be on universal credit anymore. I'll go to paradise. What are we doing? We've
well,
taken we've taken the knowledge out of everybody, and just the education system's just not letting people see how to think, and we're struggling.
yeah, well, I think when you say don't give up, one thing I would just issue a caveat to that: we should give up the futile paths that we're on. The problem is, most of us don't think we're on a futile path. So this is one of the things about subjective stuff, because all our experiences make us a subject. We can't get outside of our own head and our own experience. And so one of the things about God, whether you were a believer or not, or an atheist, or you had a view about metaphysical beings and entities, if you have an objective anchor outside of yourself, it's much harder to become delusional if you're in contact with a grounding reality. One of the problems is when we get onto our paths and we become, say, self-absorbed in our pain, which is possible because pain is painful, we can continue to walk the path of pain because it's familiar. And we can become a martyr, but not intending to. We never wanted to become a victim, but we keep walking the same path, way down, and all we've got is our own subjectivity. So we should give up our futile paths, but half the time we either don't know how to, or we don't even realize it's futile. And this is where, you know, in our case, the Christian God is the objective reality, the grounding source of everything, that we can say, right, I can say that that is the ultimate source of reality. That doesn't give me a get out of jail free card. I don't need to do anything there. I just pray. God will do it all for me. No, but there's something about a subject connecting with a bigger reality. Look at Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12 rules about believing in a power greater than ourselves. So that's taken from Christianity without being Christian. It's acknowledging that when a person with those types of problems gets lost in their own personal prison of, call it madness or whatever, and they can't get out of it, they need an objective reality. And that can just be because it gives hope, because it gives a different perspective, because it shows that there's something outside of my experience which could be being weighed down. because we can feel, look at the world we're in now. We talk about demoralization. We feel weighed down because a calculated plan of attack has been exercised against us. So we're going to feel that. So this is why so many people in these times get into, even if it's not Christian or whatever, apocalyptic stuff, all kinds of ideas about the end of the world. And that's the zombie apocalypse and the zombie horrors and all this stuff starts to come out because it speaks to our psychology. It speaks to the fears that we're living in. And we've got to find a way of getting out of our head. And sometimes that objective anchor helps us, where if we get lost on the inside, it becomes hard for us to give up the path that we're on because it's the only path we know.
And when you've been taught the path that is not conducive to a better life for you,
Yeah, exactly.
when you realise that you were taught that and everybody knows that and everybody's taught the same, apart from the people who steal all the equity from it, that for me, Alex, was just the undoer for me. My house was built on sand.
Yeah,
I had no foundation anymore. I didn't know who I was because the people that told me who I was, as in my name and stuff like that, didn't know who I was because every man and woman only know who they are. On the inside, there's a lot of people, we've known them in our past, that can on the outside look as if there's absolutely nothing wrong, everything's fine, but on the inside they don't. They've got a completely different thing, but they can act as if everything's okay. So we never truly know what people's thoughts and feelings really are, and it then breaches into the trust of people. So now, do I trust the people who taught me this? Are the ones I trusted the most? And it's it. I can mentally understand that they've not lied to me on purpose. They've not taught me this because no parents have done that. Yet all my generation were taught the same thing: work hard, pay your bills. That's what life is. Banks lend you money. You've got to pay this tax. Why? Well, because that's life. Well, when you go and look at it, no, you're not meant to. But because of the way we're acting, it's taken us into a particular path that, on presumption, they can act the way they act towards us. So it's
yeah,
just become the norm. It's become the norm. Well, when that unravels, when that's not true anymore, then everything's up for grabs. But people get bogged down those rabbit holes, stuck saying, "Oh, it's this," and it's not. It's everything. It's absolutely everything. People talk to me about religions. I'm not religious. I've not got a religion. There's no denomination. If you're a Catholic, crack on with that. But read your Bible and tell me it doesn't go against what your Pope is saying. You can't have
yeah,
it all these ways. And if my Bible's correct and all this Bible points to the same fella, because all the prophets do point to the same fella who comes to take this sin out of the world, and that's the only way out, and all the religions go, that's wrong. You've got to then go, that's interesting at least. I've never read that. Let me have a read into it. Then at least you can go, well, I didn't see that. I don't understand that. But at least you've done it. I would never have been able to say that I'd done due diligence. If at that point when I went, well, I've not read that, maybe I should. That was it. I'd never read the Bills of Exchange Act. Well, you shouldn't be paying bills. Well, why is that? Well, read the Bills of Exchange Act. Read this section. Read the Consumer Credit Act. Do you understand that what it is? Acting in commerce. You start to learn that, and it fires that. Well, we're acting wrongly. So what do you do? The opposite. Well, the opposite is act as creditor, and that's a certain thing. And I was given the correct material, correct instrument to act that way. But they didn't want to process it. They didn't want that because that takes away the cash cow. If that was true and it went against everything I've been taught, that meant everything's up for grabs. And it's very interesting that the people who do all this all worship darker energies and all want to be part of this bloodline, like King Charles, who says, I'm the direct descendant of Vlad the Impaler, the prince, the dragon prince of the serpent bloodline. Well, what does that entail? Well, that's where this Antichrist comes from. Well, that's in the Bible. Oh, yeah, it is in the Bible. I wonder if there's anything else that's in there that's could be going on.
Well, let us say, Paul, the Tower of Babel's interesting because it's in Genesis chapter 11, and it's actually a ziggurat, and Babel is connected to Babylon. It's the same root word. And of course, a ziggurat is just like a pyramid with steps. So the basic idea is on a historic sort of level, we know about ziggurats, and they're built very high. And the difference between that and a pyramid, obviously a pyramid, you'd slide down it, you wouldn't get any traction for your feet. But when you do it stepped, it creates a bigger surface area. But if you build the base big enough, in theory, and you create footsteps, in theory, you could, if you could build it high enough, you could assail heaven. So this was highly symbolic. But of course, it speaks of the endeavors of human beings starting from the ground up, trying to get into heaven, or trying to conquer or transcend their limits on their own terms. And that's a metaphor, I think, for many religions that try to get from man to God. And that's what I find really interesting about the Christian religion, because in its highest expression, God becomes man, but the perfect man. So, and clearly, man is not going to reach God because we're imperfect. Because look at the state of the world. Look at the way, when you give a human being power, how often do they not get corrupted? The levels of integrity required to not get corrupted. And then if you're not corrupted, if you come up with a water-based H2O engine, they'll kill you. So there's an incentive to become corrupted there. So all around us, the opportunity and possibility of selling out is rampant. Corruption gets in high places. So we do need, for me, this objective reality, which we would call God within the Christian tradition, coming down to earth and being the example, setting the example, showing the way, and then taking all that burden off, because we couldn't get back to God. We couldn't get up to heaven. I mean, it's interesting. So it's like, what do we do, and what does that which transcends us do? Well, we can only do what we can do. So again, Jimmy said that he started a second, I'm presuming he's not said a second channel probably on YouTube talking about mental health. And not jumping on the bandwagons just to break from comedy, which I think is really interesting, especially with what he was talking about unearthing in himself. He's having this journey within, and I think many of us are, and it's important. So I don't know, Jimmy, if you can put the details of that channel, or someone with a spanner can get the details and put it in the chat so people can check out Jimmy's new channel on addressing mental health issues. But I think what that says is we've got to take responsibility for what we can take responsibility for, and not try to do things that's beyond the scope of human being. We've got to understand our place, do what we can, take responsibility. And I think Christianity hasn't been as good at that historically as, say, the Buddhists, because they focus on awareness, that you have to become aware, that you have to make these changes. A lot of the time, Christianity has not communicated that very effectively to the person in the pew. So it almost tells them, oh, just get your spiritual fix. Come to church.
That's one of my major points, mate, because we bandy this term of a Christian and Christianity about, right? But you're talking about the people in the pews. Well, these people who are in the churches aren't being taught Christianity because it's not what it's in the Bible. As I say, if you're in a Catholic church now, you have got so many things that are not in the Bible that is being spoke about. Different theologies, people's beliefs. Oh, hey, don't worry about anything going wrong because we'll be gone before anything happens. And then when we come back, we'll reign for 1,000 years. And you can't find it in the Bible, but that is being preached. And it doesn't matter if they're really sincere and they believe it. It's got, for me, the only truth I found were in those pages, Alex. So if it doesn't reckon to those pages right now, I'm not going to go away from it. And like I've had conversations recently with people who believe they don't need to read the Bible, because they know it, they live it, and they do. They live a life of goodness. They think good things happen to them. They help people. But, the theology of it, when we go down to it, it's a man who becomes God, who becomes a deity because God works through him. It's
Yeah.
stuff I researched 10 years ago. It's stuff that I knew was just, well, I could still do this. So maybe it is me. Maybe it is me. But then when you see what all that story means all the way through, and the fundamentals of it is that Adam was meant to be that beacon. He was meant to be Christ. He was meant to be Christ-like, and he was meant to be a beacon to people, to be pure. But he corrupted himself. And he was the only pure one at that time,
Yeah.
because everything else had been corrupted. But when he fell, that meant the plan still had to go ahead. So before we knew any sin, there was no sin. So as we've said, we've heard what happened with Sodom and Gomorrah and what goes on there. We can see similar stuff now sprouting up everywhere worldwide. So that kind of thing has got to be taken away from it. But it was normal. Hey, me and you, should we get married? Yeah, well, we better have a child quick so we can sacrifice it to Baal and then we can start having a family. And that was normal to do
Right.
that.
Well, that's interesting, Paul, because, like I was going to say, just in churches, it's not even just about theological disputation, all kinds of weird and wacky doctrines. Imagine a narcissistic parent, right, who's felt a failure all their life, and they're trapped in this ego construct, and they suddenly go, hey, there's an opportunity now. I could groom my child to become a proper trans kid who could become a pioneering trans preacher in the church. Oh yeah, I've got a real opportunity. So you can see it isn't just theological corruptions in a pristine sense of the doctrines and the belief system. It can be the opportunism of a human being who's got deeper issues going on, say a narcissistic complex, who thinks, hey, we've heard of narcissistic parents who try and live vicariously through the children because they felt they failed, and suddenly they try and turn their child into an Olympic gold medal winner, drive the child to the edge of suicide, or make them, go to the best colleges to get the top grades, and if they don't, they're found swinging from a tree. So we know that kind of stuff also is in churches where people are very opportunistically. I mean, look at what happened with the Quakers, right? The Quakers were originally part of the Reformed tradition, came from the Moravians and the Quietists, right? After kind of around the time of John Wesley. But what happened? The Quakers got colonized by homosexuals because they were a bit more liberal. So all that happened was it got politicized, colonized. Oh, here's a place where you can be a gay Christian. It is, and then no, it is a place we're very accepting, open and warm. God is love. It's all forgiveness and mercy. Come and be a trans Christian here. We're pioneers. Next thing you know, suddenly they were on a path, and something which was a legitimate denomination offering people a space where they had choice, because Protestantism, at least, although it divided the church into many sects or denominations, it gave people more choice to choose that which was more conducive. But the problem with that choice, when you break down the Roman Catholic control, which was unitary in a hierarchy, it breaks down to such a degree that all the wackos can kick in, and then you get from that the sects and cults with the ridiculously outlandish ideas, and nobody knows where the line is. And that just makes a playground for people. So again, somewhere we've got to have some objective standards. Like postmodernism says, oh, all truth is relative. There is no objective truth. There is no ultimate reality. It gets down to that level that everything breaks down, and then you can't even have human nature, because human nature is a constant process of flux and change. And that's when you become a transspecial, or I want to change my gender, I'm gender fluid. It's all this stuff. And that comes from the Greek philosopher Heraclitus, because there was this big debate within Greek culture. They weren't contemporaries, but you had Parmenides, who was the philosopher of constancy, and Heraclitus, the philosopher of flux, who said you can't step in the same river twice. And those two philosophers have been pillars of most of our thinking. Like Heraclitus says, everything is change, everything is flux, which is true. Seasons come and go, life comes and go, we're born, we live, we die. So that's an observation about the nature of reality. That's how it works. But the problem is, a lot of the traditional ideas about God was that God was perfect. He was unchangeable. He was immutable. That's the technical word. Because if God could change, right, and he was either not perfect before he changed or not perfect after he changed. which means he ceases to be God. So a lot of the ideas about God that were influenced by Parmenides and Greek culture required God. And the Bible says it, the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. We don't want a God who's capricious, who's changing his mind every 2 minutes. So humans need to have an investment for security a lot of the time when it was more primitive in a cosmic parent who never changed. Whether or not there's a cosmic parent who doesn't change is different than the investment that humans have in having a cosmic parent that doesn't change. Then Heraclitus comes along and says, hey, look, there's another aspect to life. You can't step in the same river twice. Things change all the time, which of course you do. But then does God change? And it led to debates in the church like, could Christ suffer if he was God? Because God can't change. So, you know, and suddenly all these ideas in the background, in the culture, start to infect the theology, and you don't know what's culture and what's theology. So it's very, very difficult for people because you can't have theology apart from culture. You know, you can't have anything apart, like people who do astrology. You don't have any astrology without astrologers. You know, you don't have any Christianity without people being Christians. So it always comes back down to the individuals making the choices and how whole they are and how balanced they are and how together they are as a unit.
And it's the information that's in front of them as well.
Yeah.
You know, it's through these senses that we take this world in. You know, I was speaking with a mate of mine today, and we were talking about people with dementia, and many dementia patients, no matter how slight a thing it is, there's nothing wrong with them. They don't, you know, you could basically say, hey, look, Nan, isn't it a lovely day today? The sun's shining, everything, and they'll go, what are you talking about? It's midnight. The moon's out, and they're adamant that that's what they see. So it's almost that their world is they've unplugged from this world a little bit, and they're decoding something completely different, and then they come back and they fade in and out. So it's almost like all the mental health issues, because I've worked with a lot of schizophrenics and paranoid schizophrenics on antipsychotic drugs that make them psychotic, possibly. So you deal with these switches all the time. You see a lad having a fluent conversation with somebody sat next to him on the bed, and then they're not only sat on the bed, but he sees them, he watches them stand up and walks around, and he's still talking to them. So they're decoding something completely different. They're not just hearing a voice, they're seeing something completely different. And you see a lot of it in, you know, I do a lot of sleuthing on true crime detectives and stuff like that. And you see a lot of these killers you know, they're not just twisted and bent in that way, but some of them have actually having psychotic episodes, and they're decoding something completely different.
Yeah. I'll tell you what here, Paul. I just read Edward's comment in the chat. It's a cracker, Edward. To be fair, does God know about trans cash?
Of course he did. That's why he told me about it. Bloody hell, Ed. I've had this
No,
conversation.
you know what he's playing on? Trans.
All right.
Yeah,
He knows everything, though. He knows everything. That's the thing with them pages, mate. When I read those pages, things just made sense. Not here anymore. They made sense here, but it didn't make it any easier to deal with this world. You know, there's some really nasty people out here, and they're doing some really nasty things, and they're joining together. And the problem is, some of the people that are helping these nasty people think they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
You know, we're in, for me, 52 years for a kid who grew up with my only worries of, can I play football? I hope it don't rain so we play football this weekend. Those type of things. I've never seen a world like this. You know, we are actually seeing people turn on each other. We saw it over COVID, where people were grassing people up for having one too many people go in their house. You know, we're now going to have people grassing people up because my mate keeps chickens or something like that. Because
yeah, exactly.
It's fine if you register them, but so what happens to when we register property, Alex? What happens to it? It's no longer ours, so then they can come and kill our chickens, and we told them to do it. We said they could do it. Yet those chickens aren't commercial. They're our pets. But if we register them, if we chip them, if we do this, if we do that, we're complying with all the rules and system. But that's what we've been taught. And people are scared to look at what an alternative would be. If
Yeah,
everybody just said no to this, but everybody went to work and did the same jobs, then nothing would break down. But how do we do the finances?
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
there's people out there who know how to do that. There must be good people, if there's
yeah,
such a thing, but there must be people who want to change things. Because I've met lots of people who've really fought hard, Alex, who wanted to change things. They've got in touch with other people and they've come together, and then it's just fell apart. People's egos,
yeah, yeah,
or people infiltrating, all this kind of stuff. And they know that people can't organise, and when it looks like people can organise, that's when they get targeted, and
yeah, yeah,
that's when the groups break up, and the rest of it comes down to, well, it's not affecting me yet, and
yeah.
it's when it affects you. You'll want to know what to do, but is there anybody to help you? Is there anybody to sell you?
Well,
Because you're trying to
that's
tell
what.
people for years.
Well, that's what we're here for. That's what the chat's here for. We're not bad. We're an hour and 35. I'm flagging a bit, so I'm thinking in about 10 minutes I'll probably clear off. So, do you want to maybe open it up and then maybe it could carry on till about the 2 hour mark if I get off in 10, or what do you think? What do you think?
No, mate. Like I said, it's been a draining week for me with the stuff that's gone on this end. So I'm glad you'd managed to do this, because I went to try and interject just as we got to 9 o'clock. But you're on a roll, mate, and I thought I can't put his fire out. Can't
Yeah,
put his
no,
fire
I
out.
got the roll, and then I noticed that I'm feeling a bit wiped out now. But I tell you what, it's weird, isn't it? It's weird how that works, right? The inspiration in the chat, I don't know where it came from. You know, like when you try and plan things, sometimes when you try and plan things, it don't work. Now, there's a guy called Michael Polanyi, right, who talks about uh, a spontaneous social order compared to a piecemeal social order, like through communism, where people try and create a system that they impose on everyone, even if it starts off with good intention, it becomes tyrannical because one person at the top of the pyramid forces that ideology on everyone else. I remember when Bolton Council did the Bolton brand, they paid like about £1 million to some company to develop some strange rainbow logo that was just a bunch of colours on top of each other in stripes. They got £1 million for it. They became the Bolton family. And then every member of staff at Bolton Council had to become a seller of the Bolton family concept. And then to pass it on, you couldn't add to it, you couldn't tweak the vision. So, you know, these kind of things happen where when you try and overly plan and micromanage and make everyone wear the same uniform to produce a kind of conformity, even with good intentions, it usually becomes deranged and unhealthy. And yet sometimes with the best will in the world, when you just come on spontaneously feeling a bit ill, have a random thought that comes into your head, get into the zone and suddenly just start speaking, not from any script or, you know, preconceived strategized plan, but just shooting from the hip. That's what Polanyi talks about, spontaneous social order. And it applies also, like the Irish, everyone talks about like John Major and then Tony Blair and how they made these great peace accords and these great strides and we'll never negotiate with terrorists. And then, yeah, it wasn't that they did anything. It was the fact that the time was ripe and everyone was sick of bloodshed. If the time hadn't been right, it wouldn't have made any difference. So I have a sort of a secret hope or faith that if there is any hope for this world of ours, and we're not right near the end from a Christian point of view of some apocalyptic moment where Jesus comes back, then I'm hoping that there will be a moment of spontaneous recognition where everyone kind of wakes up at a similar time, and without planning it like an army, they just bring about something much more valuable and change happens. And it's that's almost a testament to God as well. The fact, the proof in the pudding that humans can't come together and organize very much with a prospect of success without becoming tyrannical. And it never works. Those empires never last. So it's almost like there's an inbuilt testimony in the fabric of reality that when humans build these ziggurats, these towers of Babel, trying to create one-size-fits-all solutions until the end of time, it invariably breaks down. Because like Heraclitus said, that's true. Always flux, always change, always got to roll with it, always got to remain flexible while holding on to truth. And we're not very good at getting the balance right between our consistency, our reliability, and our openness to new experience. Like a lot of us, like, you know, people with autism and Asperger's become very rigid in their routines to remain well, and they become very proficient at the things that they do, but they become very disabled at the things that they don't do. So it seems as if we need to get that balance between Parmenides, constancy, reliability, consistency, and flux, openness to change, openness to new experience. But that bit of spontaneity sometimes, even when you're ill and it doesn't last as long, is sometimes better than the product you planned.
Very much. It's we were talking about that then when we're talking how people can actually decode a different reality. If you're raising vibe, if you're going up so high in a ziggurat, they're not aiming to build up and knock through and climb up into anything, but it's that raising that vibration, that higher frequency. You know, Jesus, the angels, they all came in on like almost portals or stargates. We see all the races throughout history talking about portals and stargates. You see it in the Book of Enoch talking about different portals. All that's now got to be, for me at the very least, you've got to see what cosmology I've been taught by the people in this world and what the cosmology has been talked about that is related to the Bible. And the cosmologies are absolutely contrast. And then I have to then understand that a papal bull by the Vatican is issued to make sure I understand I live on a spinning ball on a wobble. That is the difference between having an open mind of what you've been taught and being humble enough to go, well, I'm not an astrophysicist, so I don't really understand it. But then when you break it down to mathematics, Alex, I've got to rely on a man who's really good at maths to understand what all that means. Whereas there's much simpler ways to understand it, but I can't be right because they're right because of maths. Well, we've discussed maths many a time. Mathematics is still only an agreed mental construct, so we can get on, and it does work for most things, but 1+1 doesn't always equal 2. You know, we've discussed it on other podcasts, so you've got to be humble enough. I said to my mate today, because he's an egg chaser, I don't chase it. It's a wrong shaped ball for me. So I wouldn't argue with him about rugby and rules and how the play's going, because I couldn't pretend to know that I know something. So it'd be silly of me to say. It's like if I was watching a football team that's on, playing up marshes in Lee on a Sunday morning. If they're not going to be up in the Premiership, you're watching really. I've lost my track there now. That was a good point. That I just noticed what the were doing.
It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. Sometimes I think I'm going to forget because you've got like 1,000 things going in your head at the same time.
There's a lot going off with that. There's a lot going off with that because you're decoding something different. So if it's happening when people are letting go from this world, because we were talking about dementia earlier, might be, when you're forgetting things, what if they're just letting go of this realm and they're going somewhere else and it's real to them? That's the same as a schizophrenic. So if you're going up to a portal, you're going to be going up to where what we're told of is the prince of the air. That's who rules this heaven, the first. So they're trying to get up. Then they're going to try and ascend and ascend. Is it physical? Is it metaphorical? Is it energetical? Is it spiritual? Is it all of them? Because we can't get into the scriptures tell us that we can't go into heaven in this fleshly body. It's got to be changed. It doesn't exist there. This is worldly. And everything dies. That's why we've got the blood. If you look at Adam and Eve, Adam was flesh and bone. After he fell, he was flesh and blood. So that's the difference. That's the contrast. You know, when we look at the promise of all those lambs from Abraham, who was going to kill Isaac, sacrifice Isaac to the Passover, all the promise that pointed to that lamb and all that done, that was it. And from that, you just start afresh. But you've got to believe in that. I couldn't believe into it until I read it and I had those experiences, mate. So,
Yeah.
what would people have to lose, pal? If
Well,
if they've read it for themselves and they've got understandings from other people with what you've been taught, why wouldn't you go and look for yourself? But people are very distracted, you
it's
know.
selective, Paul. It's selective as well. I mean, basically, I think I saw something a day or so ago with Graham Hancock, who was willfully misrepresenting the Abraham account that you mentioned, you know, to sacrifice his son Isaac. And all he says is, fancy that tyrannical Old Testament Yahweh God, who's an absolute butcher, telling Abraham to kill his own son. Now, of course, that was the beginning of the story, and that was never the intention. And he's read the same story in the Bible, but he just misses out the last bit where it's got nothing to do with that whatsoever. And nice and convenient. But that's what people do. So even when they read stuff, they just put their own spin on it. And this is why, in some senses, we're often on quicksand. And it's very difficult sometimes for people to discern. And then you get theories from all these people like Archaics and others, you know, coming out with their nice hybrid syncretism between the Bible and their own pet theories. Oh, I've got access to this particular book and these set of experts. They're giving me the inside track. But I'm supposed to believe this person above a tradition that's been established for years. Oh, it's been corrupted. Well, then how would anyone know anything? So to me, you know, it just doesn't wash. But I was going to ask you as well, Paul, because obviously time is sort of dwindling now.
Well,
How many have been on tonight?
I was just going to say, let me just finish that bit off what you were talking about there.
Yeah,
When that promise that from the Isaac, it was always Abraham showed faith, and that's why God knew he was his friend. Then that type of thing. When you see that blood was always needed because of the sin that was in this world, and to keep his people nearest to him, sacrifice had to be made. Animals were never going to be able to make a perfect sacrifice for a man. Only a man's sacrifice would be that, and that would have to be sinless. And seeing as none of us could be sinless, then legal control had already been given and handed over. So God had to come into his own creation because it's the only sinless man that could be, and he humbled himself for that. So when you mentioned about him suffering, he suffered as a man because he humbled himself. Because if he couldn't experience what I would experience,
exactly. Yeah,
then there'd be no sacrifice good enough. And
a
if that's
remote God in the sky who didn't care, who looked down
and
and
if
said, "Hey,
that's not and if
yeah,
that's not true, if that
yeah,
isn't true, then there's nothing, because there's only that one way, and that's the only way out, and that's all you got to do is believe it. But if you don't go and look and you don't ask, how do you ever get anywhere? You know, they
yeah, yeah."
don't. It's that's how I found it
I
anyway, man.
agree, Paul. I think it's a natural and logical progression of the points I'm making about our individual pain, our wounds, our psychology, taking personal responsibility. We're just a subjective, you know, entity within our own minds. We need something objective outside of ourselves to anchor us. That makes sense. So all that logic leads to the theologic that the Christian message brings. So it's you know, it's a big deal. And interestingly, towards an outro, I was going to ask you how many have been on tonight, but Ed come out with a classic comment here. You know, a bit light-hearted. God is on a fixed rate for his gas as well. He needs your remedy, Paul.
He knows it, mate. He showed it me.
He showed it you, but he still
He
needs to
showed
be able to secure the deal.
he
He
showed it
needs
to
his
me.
hands and feet in court.
Mate, he just said to me, he says, "Listen, Paul, it's free." And I went,
Yeah,
"What do you mean?" And he says, "This." And he just explained it to me. And do you know why? Because I asked. I said, why is your gas free? And you know, when you say that to people, you might get somebody laughing at you, But at least you'd go, why would you say that, to see if there was any validity around it? Because
Yeah.
I've never known anybody who loves paying the bills. They just had to. Well, then all of a sudden, this isn't true. And it was shown to me very plainly. And I couldn't trust that I understood it myself. So I gave it to other people who I trusted that would do their diligence on it and tell me the truth. And here we
Well,
are.
Jimmy is happy now, Paul. Jimmy's happy now because at the beginning he asked the question, has he asked if the gas is free yet? Or has he mentioned it? Well, there you go. We've just mentioned that the gas is free. That's for you, that, Jimmy.
He knows it's bloody free. He's heard me say it often enough. Listen, I think we're almost done 2 hours, mate. So
Yeah.
thanks for coming on. I know you've not been so good, mate, and I know it come on all of a sudden, like, but
And thanks for the well wishes. Noel in particular, a few people have wished me well. I appreciate that. Thank you for checking in.
Like I said, I wouldn't have been able to rattle on for long myself, but because it had been advertised and people turning up, I thought we'd have to at least start up. Even if I came on and only did half an hour or something like that with a few things I've written down, but there's always a dynamic that builds up, and then you get little sparks, and you go off here. And like I said, you were on fire, so I just let you go rather than cut you. So we'll cut it
Again,
off.
Spontaneous. When it's spontaneous, not planned, and sometimes that just ends up working better.
Yeah, I agree.
Wasn't part of the script, but I think it's been a good show, mate. How many have been on tonight?
We touched 52 at its peak, and it's regulated between 40 and 50 since. So there's people at least putting up with us, mate. Considering we didn't expect, well, we didn't put any expectations in it. We just thought we've got a bit of a platform. We can put something out, and we can start people talking. And if you've got 40 to 50 people who will at least speak to family and friends about it, even if they get told where to go, at least they've got something to. We're talking about decoding reality. What about changing that reality? That revival, Alex. If there's anything that people need is a revival. It's not a coincidence that since God was taken out of all the schools and all the churches, that everything's going to CAC. The shadows are coming in, aren't they?
Yeah. But big respect to everyone. It's been a good chat tonight as well.
Yeah.
And for anybody who's able to make themselves vulnerable and to acknowledge, that they're dealing with shadow material. And to be honest, I think that's the way forward, not just in their individual lives, but in their friendships, our relationships. Because if we hold back and don't share, those are the barriers. Those are the barriers we need to break down to really be close with another human being in many ways. Can be a scary thing. But when you deal with your stuff and other people deal with their stuff, there's a much better chance that we can get past all this war and all this other crap, which is the accumulated legacy of people not dealing with stuff on an individual level. So, let's take that thought with us into the week. A cracking show. And thanks everyone for showing up each week and sharing your thoughts, whether you come on the screen or whether you're just commenting in the chat. It's appreciated. And thanks, Paul, also for hosting this platform as you have done for many years. You've had a couple of breaks here and there. Come back to it again. It's vital that these kind of channels exist, and we're just doing our bit. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in, and thanks, Paul.
Cheers, mate. Speak to you in a sec. So I'll just reiterate what Alex said. Thanks for everybody who's contributed to the chat. All the well wishes that not only Alex, but the great messages I've been getting through the weeks. And sometimes when you're not having a great day, somebody will just say thank you, for something that you did years ago, or they've only just seen something, and somebody contacts you and says, you've explained it so simply, because to understand it, I wanted it simple. So if I'm not making it simple for other people to understand, then I wanted feedback. don't call me names. That just means you don't understand it. You don't want to do the work to go and look at it. Okay. But I always knew there'd come a day if people couldn't pay because people wanted to, because that's what we're taught. But when they couldn't, that's when everybody panicked and wanted to do all kinds of things that we knew didn't work 10 years ago. So it was needed that to be shown, but shown in the structure. What is the control behind it? What is the ticking? What makes all this run? It's not Boris Johnson. It's not Keir Starmer. They're not running anything. But you're shouting at them. You're voting for them. They don't work for us, but we're employing them, and they're helping the country and the judiciary and the banks and the world politics and everything just rinse the people at the minute. And it's been scary to see how compliant it was, because I don't come from an era where people I thought would put up with that. But it's been a very strange time. If people can't see what's going on around them, then England won tonight, so everything's great. Hopefully see you next week, God willing. Thanks again to Alex for managing to come on and not being so good. I appreciate it. Good night. God bless, guys.
Your gas is free. Your gas is free. In a debt-based economy. Your gas is free. Your gas is free. In a debt-based economy. Your gas is free. Your gas is free. In a debt-based economy. Your gas is free. Your gas is free. In a debt-based economy. Here's the Webster Report with Paul the Gasman Webster.